Hi, Fred. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Jeffrey.
I always like to take it back to the beginning.
Yeah.
You know, what were you working on before? Were you a quote unquote entrepreneur? And how did you make the jump into your first company? Tell me that story.
So I was one of the first quant traders on Wall Street. So what happened is in the 80s, a bunch of cone heads, as they called us, mathematicians, came up with certain things like the Black-Scholes option pricing model and the idea of doing arbitrage in bonds, including my boss, who is John Merriweather, who is the head of arbitrage at Salomon Brothers. And so I was hired after my Ph.D. in math from Stanford to join Salomon Brothers, which was at that point the largest trader in the world and headquartered in New York. So I joined Salomon Brothers, and I went to the sales and trading program, and then I became a trader. I became a very successful trader at Salomon. I had the most profitable trade in the history of the firm of Salomon Brothers. It was a product that I created that bankrupted the oldest company in the world, which was the East Asiatic Trading Company. I created a swap, which unfortunately for them, they took the other side of, and they went bankrupt. But I also
That's another podcast.
That's another podcast. But you know, I was in that world for 6 years as prop trading and made a bunch of money. And then at the age of 32, I basically said, I just can't do this anymore. I need to do something else. And I realized I had no skills whatsoever because my skills involved, I needed a $1 billion balance sheet in order to do the kind of trades that I did. And, you know, you walk off the floor at Salomon and, you know, you're in the real world and there's nobody there lending you $1 billion. You know, people are saying, well, go trade some equities. And I'm like, I don't even know how to do that. So then I decided, I went on this trip in India with my brother. We went to Rajasthan and I was like, Richard, do you have any brilliant ideas? Because I'm done with this trading. And he's like, well, this, you know, I do. I think that we should do a startup together in software. And I'm like, startup in software? Okay, that sounds good. I said, well, that's fine. Let's do a startup in software. Let's go back. After the trip, we'll go back. Where do you want to do this thing? And he goes, well, North Carolina, that's where I live. I think it's actually a really good place to do a startup. I said, done. I'm going to move to North Carolina. We'll do the startup. Got any ideas? And he's like, well, I have an idea or two. We'll figure it out later when we go to North Carolina. So moved to North Carolina, and my brother had been doing some health stuff. He was working at University of Singapore at the time, and he's doing some 3D visualization stuff. He's like, 3D silicon graphics that's the ticket. So I was like, great. You know, I actually knew the founder of Silicon Graphics from Stanford, and I'm like, yeah, okay, let's buy a Silicon Graphics machine and get going. And then I started, and I was like, great, we'd like to order 2 Silicon Graphics machines, and going, and they were like, what, can we see your business plan? And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I got the money, let's just pay it. And he goes, no, we want to see your business plan. We at Silicon Graphics. And I was like, no, this thing is not going to work, Richard.
So they would not sell you a machine without a business plan.
It was sort of one of these like enterprise sales type deals where they're like, we have different pricing for different people. You know, we need to know you better. Come out and stop in. And I was like, Richard, I'm like, this is not going to work. And I was like, what about this Windows thing, Richard? Windows, it was on Windows 3.0, and it just had come out, and I'm like, can't we do something for Windows 3? Do you have some idea? Because I think that thing's going to take off. And my brother said, well, I did this Paint program when I was at IBM. Paint, you want to do something in the graphics world? And I said, done, perfect. Let's do a Paint program for Windows. It doesn't seem like they have any really good ones. Like Photoshop was out on Mac, wasn't out on Windows. And I said, let's do a Paint program on Windows, Richard. And then so we said, okay.
So what was the first step? Did you know anything about Windows at that moment?
No, I went to the store and I bought Borland C++ and Object Windows Library, OWL they called it. And so we went to the store, bought every book, How to Program Windows, Windows for Dummies, C++ for Dummies. And I was like, great, just buy this stuff, learn this stuff, and write a program. And my brother's like, okay. So you're going to pay for this? I said, yeah, no problem. I'll pay for it. Let's So I basically, the two of us sat down in a room, and we started writing this program. And literally 2 guys in a room. And I did about 40% of the code, and my brother did 60%. I did the bad 40%. And then we banged out this program called Matisse, okay? And Matisse was really, part of the thing that made it work was that we didn't have any preconceptions as to how things should work. So, for example, I saw this, I said, explain to me how this Photoshop stuff works, Richard. And he goes, well, here you have the selection, you make a selection, you float the selection, and then you drop the selection. I said, yeah, but I don't want to drop the selection. I want to keep these selections live. And he goes, well, that's not how it works, Fred. You have to drop the selection. I go, what if we had multiple things that were just live at the same time? Well, that's what became Photoshop layers, right? That was our idea. So we were just like, well, I suppose we could do that. We could keep these things live, and we could have this list of floating layers, and I'm like, good, great, let's do that. And then we can just paint on an active layer, and then you move the layer, and you paint on another layer. So effectively, we created the concept of layers. We sold our company to Macromedia a year later. Adobe, 2 years later, came out with Photoshop 3, which basically refined and improved on our concept, to be honest. But we had the idea before. We showed it to Adobe before. We showed it to the world before, and it was a really revolutionary product, and people loved it, and it worked, and it made money. And we sold shrink wrap software, right? So we sold, at that point you had these little, floppy diskettes, right? And you made something called a golden master. So you put all your things in. You got the book. You printed a book. You put it in a box, and you shipped the box to the distributor, which was Ingram Micro. Sold to CompUSA, Egghead, and all these stores. And we sold direct too. So we took ads out in Windows Magazine, and people would call up, and they'd be like, can I get a copy of Matisse? And we're like, yes, sir. Would you like the lights and surfaces? The what? We have an add-on, the lights and surfaces. You want those, sir? Oh, yeah, definitely want those. Yeah, so we became really good at kind of direct marketing too, So we figured out cost of running an ad in the paper, how much money, how many Matisses we could sell from that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
So how long from buying Windows for Dummies till you actually had a product in the market?
Well, there was the first step. The most funniest thing is it took us about almost a year to build it because it's really slow. I mean, you're writing stuff almost it's not like now, right? You're just writing every class point, X, Y, everything's super low level, right, back then. But so we built it out in about a year, and then I remember my brother going, so what now, Fred? And I'm like, well, now we gotta sell it. And he's like, how do we do that? And I go, well, why don't we just try calling different graphic design firms in our area? So I literally called Yellow Pages at that point, right? And I'm looking for graphic design firms in the Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina area. So I remember we called this one, and the guy goes, hi, do you use Photoshop? The guy goes, yes. He goes, we have a new product that's like Photoshop, but for Windows and better. You interested? Yeah. You want to come by? Can we come by and give you a demo? The guy goes, yeah, sure. Why don't you come by at 2 p.m. and give us a demo? So I came by, and I go, here, great. My brother will install the software on your computer. And the guy goes, great. Okay, it won't hurt my computer. No, it's good. And then we install the computer. I'm sorry, your computer no longer works. We'll be leaving right now. Thank you. That was my first experience. I fried this guy's computer. Right?
So it was only up from there.
It was only up, and then then I did so it's it's funny stories now, but then I said I met these people from this art institute, and they were like, you guys have a great program. Why don't you come with us? We're going to do a trade show in Los Angeles. And I'm like, trade show in Los Angeles? Okay, that sounds good. You guys have a booth? And they go, we have a 10 by 10 booth. but we would like to take a quarter of that 10 by 10 booth and offer it to you guys. And so I go, great. So I'm going to pay for a quarter of a 10 by 10. He goes, yeah, well, just like a little space like this, and you can put your Matisse on the booth. So I say, great, I'll do that. So that I show up. It was in Anaheim. It was SIGGRAPH in 1992. I show up on this little thing this big with a little laptop, right? And I'm showing Matisse. First guy to stop by goes, what's that? I go, my brother goes, excuse me, your name? And he goes, Nathan Meervold. He goes, what do you do? And he goes, CTO Microsoft. And he goes, my brother goes, okay. You want to see the program? He goes, yeah, we have these floating layers. And the guy goes, how much? And my brother goes, $99. And he goes, not the software, the company. the company, okay, the company. And so, that was, we realized kind of at that moment that we had something really special, right? The next guy to stop by was Alvy Ray Smith. And the guy comes by and goes, hi, Alvy Ray Smith. And I go, your name sounds familiar. He goes, I founded Pixar. And I go, oh, okay. And he goes, so you got it too? And I go, yeah. And he goes, you mean what? And he goes, layers. I just invented it today too. And I go, oh, okay. So we both invented layers at the same time on the same show in the same room. And he goes, yeah. Anyways, that was the beginning of that experience. And Alvy eventually sold his startup to Microsoft, and he became kind of this Eminence grise of Microsoft. And then I sold my company to Macromedia.
But when you sold it, was it the Matisse program that actually was the thing
No.
that the buyer wanted, or was it something else?
No. So after Matisse, and this you may get something out of this or not, I don't know. But we had this really popular consumer product, right? But at that point, you made one of these things and you had to upgrade to the new program, right? So people like, I got Matisse. Now what else you got to sell me, right? So we were like, okay, we need to get something new. We got something new to sell these people. Okay, so I came up with this new idea called XRes. And it was like high resolution Matisse Super Pro. Like Matisse was $99, but XRes was going to be $700, right? Like this crazy program. Now the problem with XRes is it was too ambitious. And a lot of times as a startup, you get into the sort of version 2, you try to make it way too much. It tries to do too much. And that's what happened with XRes. We tried to do way too much. We were saying we're going to edit, at that time, gigabyte images online, which was just insane, back in 1994. And so we got XRes, and the first version of XRes that we had, I remember the top reviewer of graphic design for Macworld, Bruce Fraser, said, dashes expectations, 2 mice, or 1 mice out of 5. And I was like, oh, God, Fraser just killed my program. But then I said, you know what? We're going to go back to the lab. We're going to work on XRes. We're going to improve XRes and blah, blah, blah. And we never, I would say, really 100% got it to work. But ultimately, that's what the Macromedia bought. They bought XRes because they were like, we like it. We think we can finish it. These guys lacked the big company. We'll take it from here, Fred. Great idea. We'll take it from here.
How'd that negotiation go?
Negotiation went, first of all, what I would say is it's like a courtship, right? So first thing is we met with this team from that sold a company to Macromedia called, I forget their name now. But anyways, they had the Vector program, sort of like Illustrator, that is called Freehand, right? So the Freehand team were from Texas, and they kind of got to know us, and they're like, we like you guys. You guys are like us. You're techies. You got new tech. You guys you're not scared. You're very fast. We like you guys. So there was already a like of us, and we kind of got to know them a little bit over a couple trade shows and stuff. And then they were like, okay, we like you guys. We like XRes. We like Matisse. We like XRes. We think we can do some good stuff with you guys. We'll buy the company. And then I was like, okay, I'm making $1 million a year right now. So I had a company that was cash flowing $1 million a year. Now, I was sort of like, now, how many years could I keep that going? I don't know, right? It's like I had made $1 million, and I said, they go, well, we'll pay you $10 million for this, and I was like, 10. I was like, normally I would say yes, but you're talking to a guy who made $3 million personally the year before I started Matisse, on Wall Street. So I'm going to say no. And they're like, well, what would you take, Fred? And I said, I'll take 20 today. And then they were like, oh, fuck, Fred. And my brother was like, you said what? I said, no, we're not going to take $10 million cash. And my brother's like, you're crazy, Fred. And then they came back 3 weeks later, and they're like, look, how about 15? And I said, okay, sure, 15's good.
Round of applause. 15 done. Yeah.
And then of course the stock doubled. It was 30. So so like we got lucky. But it was you kind of have to have an edge in the negotiation. If you don't have an edge, if you can't walk away, the price would have been 5 or 2 or I don't know. So,
do you think that came from just the fact that you made a lot more money, so you were able to just bring that confidence to the negotiation table?
100%.
So what do founders do that don't have that background, that are in a negotiation? Can you fake that confidence, or do you just have to conjure it up?
I have a friend who once told me, and I think this is really good advice. It's sort of like, you got to believe it yourself. You got to get to the stage where you believe it yourself for other people to believe it, right? So you have to be, if you can convince yourself of that, right, then other people it'll emanate, right? If you can sell yourself on it. But if you're hesitant, people will detect that hesitation immediately, right? And they will sense fear, right? If they sense that, yeah, this guy kind of doesn't give a shit, we kind of gotta, this guy's not playing ball, I think you kind of have to have that attitude. That's how you sell. It's sort of like there was this book on picking up women that came out about 20 years ago. It was called The Game. Remember, with the pickup artist on MTV? Yeah. And his whole thing was, the pickup line that worked the most was, you walk into a bar, you go with the hottest girl around, and you walk up to her, and you go, you know what? You're pretty good looking. What else do you got? And then the girl will be like, excuse me? What? Well, I have a good sense of humor. I'm actually a good person. Oh, okay. All right. So, that's the human selling thing.
It's the attitude.
It's the attitude, and buyers want people who are confident, right? They want confidence. If they're buying you and they're going to invest your money in you, they want somebody who's going to stick around, and they want somebody who's confident and who has a vision and will carry it through, right? The last thing they want is some guy who's like, yeah, I'll take $2 million. That's not really cool.
So when you moved on to the next one, was it the same circumstance? Where you're like, okay, let's do the next company. What's the idea that we're going to come up with? Or was it a problem that you faced? You're like, this needs a solution.
Yeah, so I think one of the big problems we all have as entrepreneurs is we're always looking for how can we apply our skill set to go do another company, and that's usually a bad idea, right? So I exited this company, and now had whatever $10 million plus in my bank account, and I was like, looking for project number 2, and I wasn't about to waste any time either, sort of like, okay, I've got 30 days have gone by. Let's see, idea number 1, 2, 3. What do you got? And so I just started hiring just people, just like, okay, you. Let's go. Let's get a band together. Let's build something. Yeah. And they're like, what? And I go, I don't know. You got any ideas? And so we built something. We immediately pivoted because it was just a terrible idea, and then we built another thing, which also was kind of ultimately a terrible idea. we were building these websites in Java. It was a really bad idea, right? But basically, Java had just come out, and I sort of said, well, maybe we could make entire websites in Java, and as opposed to HTML, right? And we didn't have kind of modern JavaScript HTML as we know it now, right? We just sort of had like really clunky. Go to the Wayback Machine and look at what a website looked like in 1995, right? They were really not very interactive. And so I sort of, and Macromedia was sort of all talking about this not quite Flash yet, but they had Director and some other stuff. So I was like, Java sounds like the ticket, we'll do that. Now, one thing I noticed is that really appealed a lot to investors, right? So investors were like, ooh, Java, website, fantastic. Java's hot, website's hot, Fred's hot. The mix is hot. Let's back Fred, So like Sequoia Capital took term sheet, Fred, well, come on by, And then, so I was looking really good. And then all of a sudden Microsoft put this thing like, we will no longer support Java. It was sort of like, Java became hot to Arctic fridge overnight. Literally within 3 days, you said the word Java, and it was like, ugh.
How far were you in that process for the Java project?
I mean, at the very end. Like we just about ready to launch our thing. We had the term sheet. We had I forget the guy's name at Sequoia, who was just literally coming by, and he came by and he was like, this doesn't feel right. And he goes, Fred, what about the Microsoft stuff? And I'm like, don't worry about that. And he's like, I'm worried. And and then it sort of all fell apart really quick. And then I was like, oh, this thing is and then I sort of think maybe Microsoft will invest. I got invited up to Microsoft, and they're like, no, we have this new thing that we want you to build on. And I'm like, you invited me up here to tell me to rebuild on this new language that you had? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, my God. And then I called my lawyer, and I said, okay, we're going to have to declare Chapter 11 or 5 or whatever. How do we do that? And then the lawyer goes, Fred, you can't do that. And I go, why not? She goes, because I'm an investor in your company. I don't want to. I put $50,000 in this thing. I don't want to lose it.
How much have you raised total at this point for that company?
Like $3 million. And so she's like, you can't do that. And I'm like, well, you got any bright ideas? And she's like, yeah, I do. Why? My husband works at Vignette. Have you heard of Vignette? And I go, yeah, I know Vignette, but it's what does it have to do with what we're doing? She goes, well, they're very interested in Java. And I go, really? And she goes, yeah, why don't I'll get a meeting between you and Ross, the head of Vignette, and you can pitch him on your idea. So I'm like, okay. And I just sort of told everybody, like, yeah, you're probably going to go home, probably not going to get any more paycheck, so it's kind of over. And then I said, you know what? Remember I told you Friday about not going home and not getting a paycheck? Actually, I'd like you to go back to the office and hang up because Ross is going to come by the office, and I want everybody to look busy. and so Ross came by, and he's like, look, Fred, this thing's great. I love this thing. Texas guy, and he's like, Fred, this is great. Come back. You got to come down to Texas. We got to talk turkey here in Texas. And I'm like, okay, I'll fly down to Texas and talk to you. And he goes, I hope let's eat some large animals in Texas and shoot some guns and stuff. And I'm like, you don't mind moving to Texas, do you? And I'm like, no, not at all. I espouse your Texas values, sir. And so I was like, okay, Texas it is. I'm going to be moving to Texas. And then he's like, Fred, how much money you got sunk into this turkey? And I'm like, well, $3 million. And he's like, all right, tell you what, I don't have $3 million. Don't have it. But I got some stock worth $3 million. So how about that? I'll just pay you the $3 million in stock and we'll call it a day. And I go, Ross, you got yourself a deal. Got yourself a deal. We're gonna do this thing. And he's like, great.
What was that company, Vignette? What did they do?
Well, I'll tell you the crazy thing. That company, so I sold my shares to him, right? So what that company did is right now building a website is 3 people click a button. Building a corporate website in 1998 involves hiring a company like Sapiens or name it, and they're using this complicated thing called Vignette, which is basically like WordPress. Okay, this is a predecessor, except it would cost $500,000 just to license the software to build the website. So these guys had it made, right? So they had all these corporate website clients, and they'd all use Vignette. And so anyways, Vignette ended up being the #1 stock on NASDAQ in 1998. You can check it out. #1 performing stock on NASDAQ. It hit a $10 billion valuation. $10 billion. And, it was an amazing ride. And so, it's sort of like, here's an example of, I kind of had, was the company successful? No, the company was not. Was the outcome successful? Yeah, it was really successful, right? It would have been 10 times more successful if I held all my Vignette shares up to the ride, right? Because knowing me, I'm like, the minute this thing IPO'd, Morgan Stanley launched this thing and IPO'd it with a sell rating. I'm like, how can you do that? Mary Meeker was the analyst, and she's like, I'm initiating this thing with a sell rating. I'm like, I've never heard of a company taking another company public and issuing a sell rating, but they did. And on top of it, she was completely wrong because the thing split 3 times after that, and it became the #1 stock.
What do you attribute that magic to, where the company's dying, you're literally calling to close it down, the lawyer calling happens to have the person that will lead you to this financial exit for all the investors and you? Is that luck? Is that your personal magic? Like, what is that thing, and does it follow you around your whole career?
It has followed me. I do feel like I would say it's luck, but I'm a math guy, and what's the chance of, rolling 6 on a dice 10 times in a row, right? Pretty low, right? So I would say it's not, Sarah Lacey had this book called Once You're Lucky, Twice You're Smart, or something like that. But, I would sort of say that you have to persevere, but often what ends up becoming really the great exit or whatever has nothing to do with your product. It really has a lot to do with your timing, much more than the product. Timing is everything. That's, I would say, the fundamental thing. Like, timing is absolutely everything. So, in this particular case, Java was hot. I had some Java stuff. Was my product a perfect product market fit? No. But it was a perfect product market fit for a Vignette. Vignette could say, okay, we bought this thing for not much. We got a team of people who really knew Java. We could use that to increase our market cap quite a bit, right, and to build our story. And so you have to look at it from the point of view of the acquirer, right? What are they getting? And I kind of think that this acquiring thing might be kind of on its way out. So this is sort of this is what it was. But there's no straight lines, right? Everything, you're kind of going in these directions. And you have to kind of go with the flow and weave. But you have to see an opening, and you have to go for the opening. That's what I think. And I think if you think too narrowly, like, I'm going to do this, somebody's going to do this. I did my Series A. Who's going to do my Series B? That's too linear, and I think the world is not that linear. The world is, there's some weird thing that happens, and you just jump on that. That's what I think.
Well, how is your psyche during these cycles? The moment that you put that MIT software in the computer and it burnt the guy's computer.
Yeah.
Were you down that day? Did it invigorate you to just make it better? And it's that.
Well,
same,
I'd say one
piece.
of the things that here's the story. Once I was trading, and my mother was visiting me, and I was in Paris at the time, and she goes, I go, oh, I just lost $1 million, and my mother goes, you don't seem too upset. And I go, not really, no, not really. And so she's like, I could never do what you're doing because it would just drive me crazy. And I'm like, well, it doesn't drive me crazy. It's just a number, right? And so I think that's kind of, a little bit my secret is like, I don't take it too personally. Even if it's, even if it fried the guy's computer, I'm like, yeah.
Sorry.
A little bit. I mean, you got to laugh at yourself a little bit on these startups because, this is not like brain, open heart surgery where the guy's going to die either. Like, your startup's not that important. The money's not that important. The result's not that important. And, I think we always think of ourselves as like the world's going to be looking at what I'm doing. And the world doesn't care. The world really doesn't care. And so, I think that if you have more of that attitude, I think it'll help you out in life.
Did you catch more of those waves? So you caught the Windows wave, you caught the Java wave. Mm-hmm. Can you correlate all the rest of the startups to more waves? Or
yeah.
Was it more?
So I think one of the things that I've been very good at is, in general, knowing relatively what are the big trends that you want to get involved in and hopping on the trend. So the next big trend for me was consumer internet, and that was like 99. And, I just kind of exited Vignette. And I was sort of like, what do I do now? And everybody's doing these .com companies, so I sort of said, okay, I'll build a. I'm going to invest in a .com. I was, doing some angel investing, and I invested. This is a crazy story. So I met this other angel investor, prominent angel investor in Silicon Valley, and we were sort of going. He goes, I want to show you some companies. Maybe you'll find them interesting, maybe not. So we were like. Went to this one company, and it was right above a deli. And I go, this is above a deli? And he goes, yeah, above a deli in Pacific Heights. We walk up the stairs, and this guy is like sitting there, like this little, very much like Eric Bachman, like Silicon Valley, like 6 guys like in a room. And I'm like, so what do you guys got? And he goes, well, we got a prize site. And people play games, and they can win these prizes. And I go, you got a lot of people? And the guy goes, yeah, we're the 25th site on the internet right now. And I go, this deli, this site, you guys are the 25th largest site on the internet. And he goes, yeah. Want to see the metrics? Here. And I'm like looking at it and going, you guys have a pretty good little thing. And so people are going on these things to play games. What can they win? He goes, they can win a cruise. And I go, how many people win the cruise? He goes, 1. And they go, how many people you got playing? He goes, 10 million. And I'm like, and I go, I like those odds, man. I'm going to invest in this company. And then, so I tried to invest in this company, and then they were like, yeah, we don't really need your investment, Fred, because we're making money. And I'm like, that I like even more. Now I really want to invest in you. And so they were like, so then I was like, you know what? If you don't invest in me, I'm going to build a competitor to you. And the guy goes, go ahead, right ahead. It's a free world. And I said, great. So I did. I built a competitor, ultimately made a bigger site than them, and had it here. In LA, we were the largest software company in LA at the time. It was called iWin. We had about 150 people here in LA. And we had 30 million registered users, right, for our site. And we were profitable. We were doing about $3 million a month in revenue and about $2.5 million in cost. And so that was our business. And we started, and we got there in a year. So from start to finish in a year, right? And then, and we were about to go public, right, with First Boston. And then 2000 hit, March of 2000. And we were doing a Series E or something, and I thought, First Boston said, we just want you to do this one Series E. It's going to be very simple, formality, but just gives us a little bit more skin in the game, So we're going to make $1 million from this fees from the Series E, and I'm going, it can't hurt, extra $5 million. It'll take probably an afternoon or something. And then we went around Silicon Valley, and nobody wanted to write the check, and I was like, whoa. Well, what happened here? And what happened was the entire ecosystem was about to implode, right? And we just sort of got a little bit of it was like February of 2000. We just sort of like, ooh, something's wrong here, and this something's feeling wrong. And then March of 2000 hit, and I was was like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to get the hell out of Dodge. So I'm like, how do I get out of this company, like, quickly? So I knew all my competitors, and I just started calling them up one by one and say, you want to merge? And I said, well, what? Come on by. And this company, Uproar, said, come on by. And I walked, and I said, I flew to New York, sat down. Within 1 hour, I had my deal. 1 hour.
How'd that conversation go?
I said, listen, Uproar, how much? You said, you have a $100 million market cap. I have, and you're doing about $3 million a month in revenue. I'm doing about $3 million a month, but more profit. I'm profitable. You're not. How about we do 50-50 merge? The guy goes, no, Fred, no, we're not going to do that because, see, we have $100 million in cash. You have $30 million in cash. So I'll do it 50-50 enterprise value. And I go, done. That was it. And he goes, okay, great. We'll paper it up. Next day I called my board, and I said, we've sold the company. And they're like, what?
How'd that end up long term?
Ended up great. And, they sold it to Vivendi Universal. Everybody made a lot of money. Vivendi bought Blizzard. So it was a big deal in the kind of game space, but we all made money. Everybody made money.
It seems to be a theme.
Yeah. I mean, that's why we're in this thing, is to make money, just not personally and for everybody else, so it worked out.
Did you find that with all these startups, like how close to the sun did you come each time? Like how close to dying did these companies come? Was it consistent? Were you just so used to it, or was it here and there?
Consistent. Every one of these companies has a near-death experience. Absolutely. I told you about the near-death experience Matisse never really had a near-death experience. It had one when Bruce Fraser gave us the one mouse out of 5. Yeah. That was a near-death. We really thought that was it. And then the vignette thing, that was absolutely very close to near-death. And, the Tag World sale to Viacom, that one, the near death was, we did our deal, but it took 6 months to close the long form agreement. And during that period, Viacom came back and they were like, we're going to pay you half as much, and we're going to change the terms, and we're going to do this. I thought the deal was not going to happen. So got pretty used to it. So I think I think most of you guys who will have exits will probably have near heart attacks before you get exits. I think that's to be expected.
What other advice do you have to founders on this subject, in terms of like what gets entrepreneurs through those and allows them to keep going before they quit?
That's a really good question. I like to think that some of my stuff applies now, but it's a different world, right? So when I was doing most of my startups, there wasn't so much competition. There wasn't places like this or WeWork or these incubators and stuff all over. There were very few people doing startups. On the other hand, the barriers to creating a startup were much harder, right? You needed to, just getting a website built, you needed to have somebody to do your IT and to host your racks and all this stuff. So, it's a different world now. There's probably much more opportunity now, right, than there ever has been. So, I think right now we are arguably, in the golden age of tech. And I think it really started 2.5 years ago with ChatGPT, right? Like, the way I look at it is, there was everything was a blur until AI. And AI is really the only tech thing that mattered. That's, we're going to look back and, the PC, who cares? The internet, who cares? I hate to say it, but Bitcoin, who cares? You know what I mean? But like, because I'm a big Bitcoiner. But, you know, I think that the big invention of humanity, not just in the last 100 years, but the big invention of humanity is machines thinking, right? And so, you know, we are now in this world where 2.5 years ago, the machine woke up and it said, hello, you know, and that's the new world we're living in. And so I think that offers way more opportunity than ever before, both working with the machine, figuring out how that machine will impact the rest of humanity. And I think if we're, you know, I think the most important thing is to spend all your time on AI right now. It's like, that's it. That is the only thing to spend your time on. And I think there's going to be amazing outcomes for people who get it right fast. That's what I think.
What about all the founders that have been working on their project for several years? Do they look at AI as this new threat where someone's going to be able to recreate what they built? Or do they look at it like a co-pilot where they need to just figure out how to enhance whatever they're working on through this new technology?
They better figure out. I mean, look, AI is not, you know, when I first looked at AI, I think a lot of people, including myself, were like, okay, this is going to be a winner take all, and maybe Google's going to win it, right? Because Google's got the most servers, the most PhDs, et cetera, right? I no longer think that. I actually think AI is going to be, actually small teams can build amazing shit in AI, right? So, and I think we've seen that with DeepSeek, right? That's just, you know, the poster child of that, right? But also, I think if you think about, you know, surgical, let's just say you're talking about doing surgery, right? Is the top AI, is ChatGPT going to be doing the surgeries? Probably unlikely, you know. It's probably going to be the Mayo Clinic's AI, you know, that's going to be built around surgery and built around medicine and everything else. That's going to be amazing at doing that, right? So I think, you know, there's going to be a great AI around gaming, around factory automation, about everything, legal writing, everything, right? So I'm much more of the opinion now that AI is going to be much more of a lots of entrepreneurial smaller efforts that are very focused on specific use cases, and they're going to kill it. That's what I think.
Are there any specific areas of AI that you're most excited about that are a reflection of what's happening the most right now?
I don't think so, because I think that what AI is it's a very general thing, right? So it's not, there's not like elements of AI. AI applies to everything right now. It's kind of what I was saying earlier to you, I think, is that there's two things where I think you really realize. I think when most people, when they look at AI, they go, well, cute parlor trick, you know? Oh, I can make an image. That's cool. I can write a poem. That's cool. You know, I can make a Twitter thing. Oh, maybe I'll make my marketing plan in AI, you know? That's sort of the parlor trick level, like, oh, that's cute, right? I think the two things where you realize it's not just cute are, number one, coding, right? When you've seen something like Windsurf, right, with Claude 3.7, and you look at that and you're like, and you know, I'm sitting there, I'm no longer, you know, I used to be a very, very good coder a long time ago, you know, but those years are long over, right? But I sat down with Windsurf and I built a beautiful data-driven website, deployed it, okay? And, you know, it works, right? And I did that in, I don't know, 8 hours, you know, start to finish. I did it alone, not with somebody, you know, mentoring me to do this, do that, you know. And then I was showing my friend Ben, our mutual friend Ben, and he was like, wait a second, how did you do that? And I'm like, well, the AI said, you know, you want to go to this SupraNet database and then use this Postgres database and then, you know, do this and then go to Netlify and then set up, you know, it did everything it basically instructed me every single step of the way. And, you know, then I've got this site. So I think that was the first aha moment, like, ooh, okay, this is no longer at the game level anymore. This is like this is like way beyond teams of humans. And then I think the other example of this is self-driving cars. So we bought recently a Tesla, with full self-driving. And I think when you get in, whether it's a Tesla or a Waymo, you realize, wow, this thing does a better job at driving than a human does. So, to me, it's just inevitable now that in the next 5 years, AI is going to take over everything, and getting in advance of that curve is going to be enormous, right? And it's going to be enormously profitable. You just have to find where can you figure out how to apply that AI in whatever vertical that you happen to know. How can you possibly use that AI? And I think that's going to be unbelievable.
We're going to turn over to QA in a minute, but I can't not ask you about crypto and Bitcoin. I mean, you're sort of a top voice in Twitter around the Bitcoin topic. Words of wisdom for a group of entrepreneurs and a group of listeners online about what's happening in the financial space and how you're seeing Bitcoin evolve over the next 10, 20, 30 years.
So first of all, I would rank AI here in terms of like the impact to the world, internet here, and Bitcoin in the middle. Okay, so I think Bitcoin is that important, right? It's such an important idea, and once you really understand how amazing and how important Bitcoin is, it really is. It is bigger than the internet. And why do I say that? It's not even a technology. It's really something different. It's the idea that you can create value, digital scarcity, and that you can take that value with you wherever you go. It's a mind-blowing idea, okay? Now, you may not like the Trump government, but with Bitcoin, you could go to Costa Rica and take your wealth with you. You may not like the Costa Rican government or the Russian government, but you can take your Bitcoin with you from Russia to Turkey or from Turkey to anywhere you want, right? So the ability to have portable value is something that's just mind-blowing, right? And I think all of us, we have been conditioned to think of real estate, for example, as a place to store our value, right? You want to own your home. You want to have a second home, Airbnbs and so on, right? Or you want to own stocks. But what if you could just own money itself? You could own something that never goes down in value, really, over the long term. It never goes down. And that's it. It's just a one-stop decision. Just buy Bitcoin. Hold Bitcoin. And so I think Bitcoin is just an unbelievable invention, right? Because it's the invention of, it will change literally the entire economics of the entire planet, right? So I discovered a Bitcoin a while ago. I just became kind of like an advocate of Bitcoin. I think it's fantastic. I think broader speaking, broader than Bitcoin, there's a whole ecosystem that's developing now around tokenization of everything, right? And, in 2017, and this is, I think, some advice for entrepreneurs, right? So in 2017, we had this first wave of ICOs, right? And everybody, especially Bitcoiners of my ilk, were the kind of guys who say, crypto bad, Bitcoin good, right? We always say that, right? But I would say that we're about to see a new wave of crypto. And this is going to be fueled by people using stable coins for everything, right? And why do you want to use those stable coins? Why can't, I just bought a cappuccino here. Why couldn't could I've used Well, Visa works pretty well for that. For the cappuccino, worked okay. It doesn't work so well for digital goods, right? For buying digital goods online. And I think that we are exactly at this point where the amount of digital goods that we buy is going to start booming. It's just going to explode. It is exploding, right? And whether it's an AI subscription or any of the things that you guys are building, you kind of want to sell it so I can buy it with the token, right? A stable coin, it could be Solana, it could be Bitcoin, it could be wrapped Bitcoin, it could be something like that, right? But the tokenization of everything is really important. And also, the tokenization of whatever project you're doing is really important. So I really am of the opinion that tokens are better than equity now. So I as an investor, and I am investing, right? So if you guys have a great idea or something, you don't have to hit me up today after the thing, but my emails are open. You can just go to me and say, hey, I saw you at KINN or whatever, right? I'm much more interested in putting money into tokens than I am into equity. And I really think that we are into this golden age where these tokens are going to be booming, right, again. And I think the 2017, the learning that all that was a scam and everything, that's a little bit like saying Webvan didn't work back in 1999. But guess what? Amazon Fresh is working great now, right? So the learnings of this are not really good. I think, and I think Bitcoiners often confuse the fact that Bitcoin good does not necessarily mean that all crypto bad, right? So I am in favor of crypto. I'm a crypto maximalist actually now. I think all crypto's good. Sure, a lot of them will go to zero. A lot of them will go bad, right? And I'll just say, somebody was like, "Are you going to talk about meme coins?" I will talk a little bit about meme coins, okay? So I did these three shows called Meme Tank. Right? I just said, you know what? Everybody hates meme coins so much. I'm just going to do a show called Meme Tank. And I said, we'll see. This is, again, I think I don't take myself too seriously, as you can tell. So I said, yeah, fine. I'll go and I'll do it like Shark Tank, right? And I'll just go, hey, got a meme coin? I'll buy it, right? So the first guy who shows up said, yeah, Fred. I go, what do you got to sell? And so one of my other shark was Isabel Foxen Duke. She's a Bitcoiner from Puerto Rico, right? And so she was like, this guy Bob goes, okay, I got this coin called Odin Dog. Okay, it's the first coin on Odin.fun, which is like Pump.fun. And it just had been released. And so I'm like usual Fred, like, sounds good. Great. Okay, how much Odin Dog do you want to sell? He goes, well, let's see. It's worth $10,000 now, so I'll sell half of it to you guys for $5,000. So we did. So I bought $2,500 worth of Odin Dog for $2,500. I bought $2,500 for whatever, a quarter of the Odin Dog supply. Well, I got, it took me a while to get the tokens because I needed to get the special wallet and everything. I just got the tokens. It's worth $90,000. Okay. This was last 30 days, right? So I got $90,000 worth of this coin called Odin Dog. And then Bob calls. He goes, I hope you're not going to sell it like day one. I know you, Fred. You're probably just going to dump this thing. I go, no. I'll keep the dog, keep him alive a little bit. But this is the kind of thing. I jumped in this stupid meme thing. I said, I'll take a chance. Like, I'll risk $2,500. I'll risk a little bit of money on these stupid memes. And guess what? This thing pays off 20x.
Did you catch the wave right as it?
Yeah, I caught it and the wave crashed. And no, there is no more meme. But, here's the thing. There's going to be the next wave, right? So, these things are not like, if you sort of look at, and I get it. Mateo's here, so the Bitcoiners they're all looking at the negative, like it's going down. Everything's gonna go down. It's all going. Now, I have a more optimistic view. My view is probably most of them will go up, but I bet you some of them really go up. Most .coms went down, but we also had Amazon. You know what I mean? So don't knock them too much. You know what I mean? And so. Most of these meme coins did well, but Shiba Inu and Dogecoin are doing great, right? In fact, Dogecoin has outperformed Bitcoin for the last 8 years, 5 years, 3 years. Dogecoin's done phenomenal. So it's not good to be too much Opus Dei maniacal. You have to have an open mind. And, I am really bullish on the intersection of blockchains and projects and consumer stuff and things that people find fun. I think people, I'll just finish up by saying, Matisse, why did Matisse work? Because people had a computer. They bought these computers. They bought them for their kids. That's what they did. They bought these computers. They're like, hey, honey, we got to get a PC. Like, sure, yeah, we got to get a PC for Johnny. Yeah, Johnny's going to school, so Johnny might need a PC. It'll make him smarter. They get the PC, and they're like, what do we put on our PC? There's an app to balance the checkbook, and there's Microsoft Olympics. Okay, both of them suck. And then they're like, well, there's this paint program called Matisse. Okay, we'll buy that. Johnny will become Van Gogh. Yeah. So that's kind of people are kind of dumb, And so that's now you've got these people like, I got the wallet. I got the Solana wallet. I added some Solana to my wallet, honey. Yeah, well, what am I going to do with it? I don't know. Pump.fun. There's some tokens there. You want to buy some? I mean, that's it. That's the mentality. And so I think that's where that's where we're going.
All right, we're going QA. Wait for the microphone because this is all getting recorded. So we got beautiful pink shirt right there, Erin.
I have a question. So the KINN is all about positive social impact. That's kind of like the main brand here. So of all the things that you're talking about in your illustrious career, what would you say your intentions/achievements are with regard to positive social impact?
Well, I'll tell you about one that didn't work for me, which was I got very interested in the eco movement around 2009. And I was doing these domains, okay? So KINN, the company that did all these top-level domains, right? And they were issuing new ones. So some of you may have seen .work or .vip or .tech or something at the end. So anyways, these things were available, and you could go and get them. So I said, this has Fred Krueger written all over it, man. This is like me. I'm ready. So I ended up applying for 87 of them, and I ended up getting 25 of them, these top-level domains. And one of the ones I applied for was .eco. And I reached out, and I got the support of Al Gore for .eco. And, this is how I sold him. I said, Al, I finally got this meeting. First I went to Davis Guggenheim, who did the movie with Al. And he liked the idea of .eco. And we're like, we're going to give back to the eco community. Everybody's going to get these eco domain names and everything. And then we said, Al will love this. So I went to Al, and I said, Al. And he's like, yeah, Fred, yeah. And I'm like, al.com, .org, .eco. And he's like, I love it, Fred. I love it. I love it. That is great, Fred. You got my support. So anyways, we tried to get this .eco thing going with Al Gore. It didn't work. Ultimately, we got into a fight with Gorbachev's. Believe it or not, there was a competing .eco that was sponsored by Gorbachev. So it was like Gorbachev versus Gore, Krueger versus the other guys, And anyways, we ended up not getting .eco, but .eco ended up not working. I think, I had some good intentions with it, but ultimately, these things have a life of their own. Wherever they're going to go, they're going to go. I think if you try to do something, it may not succeed. If you don't try, you may go to a different direction. So I'm pretty opportunistic. Whatever works. I would have liked that one to work. I had some great ideas around that. Still do, but that's it.
All right. White hat. Hi, first of all, thank you for being here. My name's Gary Pearl, a member of the KINN. Actually, I'm doing a startup that has to do with, it's cross-section of film meets, which Jeffrey knows about, meets AI and scheduling with the major film libraries. But my question, and by the way, I put all the people into the Inconvenient Truth, which you just mentioned. My question has to do with this. When you're raising money for a startup, it seems like the market's changed. That when you're raising money, it used to be that in my mind, that you're actually not just raising money, you're raising smart money. and you're raising the people that can advise you. Now it seems like the money that's coming from the funds and from the investors are really just money, and that what you're using it for is for labor. And because of AI, labor's become a lot cheaper. And is it still, in your mind, would you just do the startup and try and get the people you need and as much AI as you can use, and not raise as much or not raise at all, and go as far as you can without that, and then eventually use the advisors in a different way? I hope that was clear.
Here's the thing. I think that I think you're right. I think it has completely changed, right? But I think it's changed because I think VC is broken. I think ultimately the VC model that was, Series A, seed, V, I think this model is kind of broken. And I think it broke a while ago. And I think the replacement for that model is tokens. Okay, so I think that, you'd be better off looking at a token-based model, especially under the current administration, which is no longer criminalizing raising money with tokens. I think tokens are better, and I just like that model better, right? I think as an investor, it's more flexible. I think the idea of like having these term sheets and Series seed and all these kind of all this stuff to me is going to change, and I think it needs to change because I think it's obsolete. And I think one of the things that, since you mentioned AI, there's something I'm kind of looking into right now, which is it's kind of a new interesting thing, which is these BitTensor Tau subnets. I don't know if you've heard of them, but BitTensor it's a token which is sort of rewards people for AI projects, right? And it sort of incentivizes not just the organization that's doing it, but also independent people that can help refine the AI. So I like that kind of model a lot, right? I like the idea of eliminating friction. You're not doing equity, because I think the number of exits is going to go down, right? And I think people are just going to want tokens. They're not going to want to have these exits and have to wait for some company to. How many companies how many M&A events have there been? There's been very few over the last 5 years. You know what I mean? We haven't had, the kind of the pace is not there anymore. So I think tokens are great, and I would focus on tokens.
Here in front.
Well, first of all, my name is Fouad, and I really thank you for sharing your experience with us. Very thought-provoking and intriguing. I enjoyed it. The first comment that there was a question about what's the underlying concept that helped you in all these success story. I think the most important thing is to be at the right place at the right time, and also what I call serendipity, and having the right connection with people. That's probably what
I would agree with that. Yeah. I think timing, and there's been studies about this, right? They've sort of said team, timing, money. If you have a lot of money and your timing is not good, it won't help you. It really won't. If you don't have the product market fit and you got a lot, and I've been in that situation, right, where I've had a lot of money, but the product market fit wasn't good, or the timing wasn't good, so I do think timing is the most important thing, by far, by not even close. I think everything is about, are you late? Is somebody doing what you're already doing? Because I think if somebody's already doing sort of what you're doing, don't do it. That's kind of my gut feel. You better have something that's pretty unique, because somebody eventually will do exactly what you're doing.
But I have also a question for
Sure.
you. You spoke highly about about AI.
Yeah.
And we know it's very hot. Everybody is going at. But I want to make sure that you're talking about generative AI or general AI. And can you talk a little bit about the difference of the two? Because I have some other idea about the state of the art and practice of AI and where we're going. But I would like to hear your comment about the difference between the two, if you're talking about general AI or Gen AI at this point, generative AI.
I'm not sure I understand exactly your distinction.
So let me to explain
Yeah, go ahead.
it. Generative AI or large language models that are very hot these days, we're really talking about a huge database. The larger the data you have, the more successful these will be. And basically, this is a statistical package. And there is not much intelligence in those, and they're very targeted. And they basically use the software itself doesn't have any intelligence.
That's right.
It thinks about, if I take this token, which is like a keyword or phrase that is here, what's the most likely word that comes after this, and then after that, and after that. So it constructed based on the huge database, but it doesn't know what it's
totally
putting
agree,
out.
right? So like which is the kind of the crazy thing, right? Because, it's sort of like I heard about this stuff, this sort of general idea of how this machine learning worked back in 1980, right? And I actually I have a published paper in IEEE Transactions of AI and Pattern Recognition and Machine Intelligence back in 1980. But I never thought this stuff would work, right? Now it does. But here's the thing. I think what I would say is interesting is applications that use AI. So figure out something, and perfect example is self-driving cars, right? That's an application. It makes the car smart, So I think it's can you guys figure out how I can use AI in a smart way to make things that you do now better? And I'm sure all of you can think of really cool ways that you can use AI in a potentially very narrow way. Potentially all you're doing is querying these LLMs, and processing it within your narrow area. It doesn't matter. You don't have to be running large things. You just have to. What matters is the result. Is can you build something that's useful to a user, and that can you leverage the AI to do something that previously was not easy? And I think that there's a lot of great applications like that are going to be built. And I really think there's a huge time pressure now, because if you can get in front of that bus in the next 6 months, the next 9 months, you could really be in a great space. Sure that the AI is going to improve and there's going to be tons and tons of stuff. You're not going to be training the raw LLMs. You're not going to do that, right? That's somebody else. But you can start developing really good local applications that are best of class, I think. And a great example of that is this application called Windsurf that we've seen, right? It's a great coding environment with an IDE. Now, it has sort of swappable AIs. You can just say, I'm going to go from Claude to Grok, right? I was like, I'm going to swap out my brain. I'd like a different brain, please. Thank you.
All right, we're gonna close. There's gonna be a lot of time for dialogue. I want to thank Fred. Everyone, round of applause for Fred. Thank you, KINN. Thank you, Michael, Best Law Firm. If you have any legal questions whatsoever, please talk to that crew. I'll be here next month, so I do this the first Wednesday of every month. Next month, we're going to be talking to Jessica, the founder of Kiva. So Kiva, she went to Africa, found a local entrepreneur with a fruit stand who needed $50 to be an entrepreneur, and she created a model where people from anywhere could loan that person $50, not donate, but loan that $50. It's a few years later, they've done $3 billion in microtransactions with a 96% repayment rate. So unbelievable story, unbelievable entrepreneur, huge impact. So it's going to be next month. I'll send an email, but just wanted to thank everybody for being here. The whole point of this is to meet your community. So after this, stay around, talk to other entrepreneurs. Maybe you'll magically meet the person you're supposed to meet today. That's the whole point. And thank you so much. Have a great day.